Hello again, Sandwich and the Cape and the Islands. I say that for a particular reason. My name is Greg Anderson, and welcome into a conversation that I think is really going to be enjoyable for you. You're going to learn something today. And maybe I'm just kind of talking from wishful thinking that I love the law, and this is my first time being able to interview a candidate for the Cape and Islands District Attorney job. You know, I love the law. I am not a Law and Order guy, but I do love Dateline, and I don't watch it alone. My wife is always there. But for 53 years, that's how old I am, I have always been called for jury duty. And every time I get it, I'm like, thumbs up, let's go. Once I was even called for the grand jury, and if I could have done that as a paid job, I would have done that for the rest of my life. I like seeing the inner workings. So today, while we're talking to one of the four candidates, I want to extract out as much as I can about the job, and in particular what this one candidate is interested in and why he is one of four people running for this seat. Current DA Michael O'Keefe has said, I'm not running again, he's out, so this is up for grabs, and whoever wins this fall will be the third Cape and Islands District Attorney in over 45 years. This is a big one, folks. Welcome, candidate and attorney Robert Galibois.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
Very nice to meet you, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. You know, as I said, the winner of this race will be the third DA.
Yes.
In that long period of time, and Philip Rollins and Michael O'Keefe are the ones that held those the jobs in that time frame. Both are Republicans.
Yes.
What is that significance of, if it were to be you, what is the significance of that long stretch of time and you taking the seat?
Well, as I've been making my way around in this campaign, Greg, since January, that's when we announced, I've literally been able to go into the communities from Main Street, Buzzards Bay, all the way down to Commercial Street, Provincetown, and virtually everything in between. And I've been out to both islands multiple times. And what I keep hearing from voters is that there's a disconnect between the district attorney's office and the people that it serves. So many folks, overwhelming majority, have no idea what the DA's office does. And equally so, they don't know anyone in the district attorney's office.
So I want to ask you about what the job is, because I'm really curious, but give us a little bit of history, because I think part of this discussion is rooted on the fact that most people don't know what the job is.
Right.
They don't know and why do I care? But give us a little history of the Cape and Islands District Attorney Office.
Sure. So it was born basically out of what occurred in Chappaquiddick in July of 1969. Back at that time, the district attorney was down in New Bedford. The gentleman's last name was Denise. And as you might imagine with that type of case, he was under scrutiny from both sides. Some were attacking him and saying that you were treating the case too lightly. Others were attacking him saying you were treating it too seriously. So a gentleman from Mashpee saw an opportunity to challenge him the following year in 1970. That gentleman was Phil Rollins from Mashpee. He was on the select board.
So the district attorney at that time, Denise, covered New Bedford and the Cape and Islands.
It's all part of the same jurisdiction,
Got it.
yes. So when Rollins was successful in challenging him, and one of the first things Rollins did was work with his legislative colleagues and carved out the Cape and Islands district. He was successful in those efforts, and in 1974, the Cape and Islands DA's office was born essentially, and Rollins ran as a candidate for that office and was successful, carried it through 2002. So that's some 30 plus years.
32 years, yeah.
And then his long-term assistant, Mike O'Keefe, carried it from 2002 to today, where he's retiring. He's announced his retirement at the end of this particular term. As to what is the district attorney's office, the DA, Greg, is an impact player in the criminal justice system. We've been explaining that it's often the conscience, or the DA represents the conscience of the community. The district attorney gets to choose, what cases am I going to prosecute? What charges am I going to press in those prosecutions, and which cases are we going to divert? So without question, the district attorney is the biggest player in the criminal justice system.
When you look at a new administration coming in, and as you cast it the way you did, you know, Rollins, Republican, O'Keefe, a Republican, they kind of knew each other, 32 years, 20 years, that's a long time, kind of with one rhythm, if you will, of running. how disruptive is it going to be for whether it's you or the other three to come in and change in the first time in over 20 years?
For me, I don't think it's going to be disruptive at all. We've been going around talking to folks about the importance of community engagement and having the district attorney's office with the communities. And I've been very fortunate throughout my 27 years of practice to have gotten to know a lot of lawyers and prosecutors across the Commonwealth that see this as a very exciting times. We have a chance to inject a lot of fresh ideas for the Cape and the Islands, concrete ideas that we can articulate. We see that works in other counties and bring them to the Cape so we can go forward with what is our first priority, of course, and that's public safety.
We're going to talk about some of the priorities of your campaign in a bit, but tell me a little bit about your law specialty. What is your background in law?
Okay. I started off back in the mid-90s, shortly after getting my law license as a prosecutor. Phil Rollins hired me. And like many new prosecutors, you start at the district court level. That's where most of your misdemeanor type offenses and your low-level felonies are handled. On the Cape and Islands, Greg, we have 5 district courts, 3 across the Cape and 1 on each island. And I worked in all 5 of those district courts as a young prosecutor. After about 3 years, I ascended up to the Superior Court where your major felonies are handled. I did that for a couple of years. And then after about 5.5 years in the office, I went into private practice in Barnstable Village for a firm working exclusively in criminal law. And again, after about 5 years, I took that leap of faith and opened up my own practice where you quickly learn the value of creating a budget and the importance of operating inside that budget. So that was in 2008, and I've maintained a private practice since then. The diversity of my practice ranges from your misdemeanor type offenses like your OUI type of cases through major felonies, bank robbery type cases, and to date, I've handled, as the lead lawyer, 15 homicide cases.
Wow, 15 homicides.
15.
How many here on the Cape?
We've had a few on the Cape. Off the top of my head, I'd say probably 3 or 4 off the top of my head.
Okay. When somebody steps into a new job, and this would be a new job for you, it's not like you're jumping into a different career, it's a new job for you. There's always a learning curve. Is there a learning curve that you think you're going to have to contend with if you were to get this?
I would say, if any, it'd be minor for the following reason. 27 years in criminal law, working with district attorneys' offices, not just this one, but all across the Commonwealth, in other states. I've been fortunate to go other states for my practice, so I get to see how those district attorneys try to transform their priorities into practice, what works, what doesn't work. So quite honestly, in terms of a learning curve, I've been doing this for a long, long time, both personally and getting to know and see how prosecutors' offices work. So there'll be a minimal learning curve with me.
In your campaign material, you seem to be leaning in on messaging surrounding where you live. You originated, you and your wife first lived in Bourne, went to the South Shore, Barnstable now. Is that a significant talking point for you? Is there a need to clarify it?
No, I'm an open book, and I'm trying to explain, this is who I am. As you just mentioned, we came down here as a new married couple. Our very first apartment was in Bourne, Mass. And coincidentally and ironically, only time we've had a water view. A basement apartment, we had a water view, the only time in our married life. Yes, we, like everyone else, you try to pay off college debt, save. That took a few years. We bought a house. We lived in Bourne. We were there for about 20 years, just shy of 20 years. We have 2 sons, Max and Cam, and they had an opportunity to further their education up at BC High in Boston. As parents, you try to do what you can for your kids, so we moved closer to Boston during that time period. Our youngest one is now graduated, so now we're back here in the Cape. It's our roots as a married couple, if you will. I've never left. 27 years, I need to be clear, never left the Cape in my practice. For 27 years, I have practiced consistently on Cape Cod. None of my opponents can say that.
There are 4 of you running, and you are the lone Democrat.
Yes.
And you're hoping to take an office which, for these 45 years has been a Republican-run thing. How much does politics, for the average person out there, who's myself included, what does a political affiliation actually matter to a district attorney?
It should have absolutely none. Absolutely none. You have to be apolitical as a prosecutor. You judge the set of facts, you look at the set of circumstances on each individual case, and you act accordingly. I'm focusing more in on the length of time of essentially the same administration. Rollins, of course, started it. O'Keefe has followed foot, but because they worked together closely for so long, it's essentially been the same administration. And I would suggest, like a lot of things, when we're talking nearly a half a century, and that's what we're talking about, 48 years, complacency can develop, and oftentimes it can run deeply. So this is when this dovetails into how I've been making my way around, and people not knowing what the DA's office does and not knowing the folks in the district attorney's office.
Yeah.
And we have the specific plans on how to remedy that.
So back on the political thing, though, have you seen, and can you give examples of where politics has seeped into the O'Keefe administration, if you will?
I can't specifically say. I'm not on the inside, so I'm not answering the phone if certain politicians are calling his office looking for whatever they may be looking for.
Yep.
I just want to try to maintain the course and say it's an apolitical job and proceed accordingly.
In your campaign material, you reference outreach to the district. In fact, you say, quote, "I will personally engage in community outreach and collaborations." What does that mean, and can you give me some examples?
Of course. So I've been telling folks on day one of my administration, I will create a full-time job, and it's going to be known as the Community Engagement Officer. That person's not going to have an office in the building. They're going to have a car and a cell phone. And every single day, they're going to be in the community, try to keep their finger on the pulse of the neighborhoods and report back directly to me so we know what's going on. That's one of three ways, Greg. The other two, we launched an initiative a couple months ago. We said we'd create a community coalition, and we're going to call it the DA and Us. And each town on the Cape and both islands will have a chapter in the coalition. The coalition is going to be comprised of local elected officials like select board members or school committee members, local officials like police officer types, and members from the community. And every single month, each community is going to have a meeting with our particular office, and it's just another way to try to remain connected to the community. This third piece, and this seems to be the most popular whenever I talk about it, the DA's office has 65 employees. Every single employee is going to commit to 4 hours of community service, including yours truly. So over the course of a year, you're talking about thousands of hours, yet another way for us to be involved with the people that we serve.
So are you suggesting that the office right now is very insulated?
I think there's a lot of work that could be done to reconnect with the people that it serves.
In your campaign material, you mention 7 priorities: the opioid crisis, mental health, diversion, pretrial detention, racial disparities in the criminal system, sentencing recommendations, and abuse of elders and individuals with disabilities.
Right.
Let me unpack a couple of these. Let's
Sure.
talk about the opioid crisis. You say progress on this war of drug was halted by the pandemic. I probably could argue, yeah, it sounds right, but can you be specific as to how?
Sure. Well, like virtually everything, industries shut down, and attempts to assist folks were lessened because of the pandemic. That's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And what I've been doing on this campaign is an outfit known as the Duffy Center. Many people that are touched by the opioid crisis are familiar with the Duffy Center. There's a new outfit in town called Column Health, and we welcome them with open arms because we need more help. I've met with officials at Duffy and Column Health. And the elephant in the room, Greg, is that there is no residential treatment programs mid-Cape to Outer Cape, on both islands as well. We have some in the Upper Cape area, but not in the Mid-Cape to Lower Cape. So how do we address that? And the conversations lead to trying to put together a focus group where you have, of course, your local state officials. You bring in professionals in the field, and yes, investors. You got to find some private investors and try to encourage them to launch this particular residential treatment programs. Now, this is not normally a role for the district attorney's office.
You're getting my
Right.
next question.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not traditional times, though, and hasn't been for quite a while. To be this far into the opioid crisis and not have those services available, we're talking, a decade or better at this particular point. Why haven't those efforts been made? Why haven't they been launched? So that's something that is near and dear to my heart, and that's something that our administration will focus on very early on.
Pretrial diversion. Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 276A, allows for, and these are my words.
Yep.
I like your smiling because I'm sounding like an attorney right now.
I'm loving it. I'm
Okay.
absolutely a frustrated lawyer over here.
I'm a frustrated
loving it.
lawyer and a very proud juror. It allows for qualifying a defendant's opportunity to kind of avoid the criminal justice system
Yes.
for, I guess, lower offenses. Or
Correct.
Can you define that a little bit
Sure.
better and what that means?
What we've talked about is we will entertain this pretrial diversion if someone comes in with a low-level misdemeanor offense, and right off the rip, we are not doing this on violent cases at all.
Okay.
That'll be a
So
disqualification.
define a lower.
A disorderly type of case, a small larceny type case, things of that type of sort.
Okay.
And we're not talking about OUIs either. So if we get to know the defendant's background, and we have a layer of confidence that this was an aberration, this person's not going to come back before the courts again, and we want to try to work to preserve their record. If they're willing to demonstrate they're willing to do something like a community service-based operation or engage in whatever counseling that they might need, we're willing to work with them over a period of time. If they perform what they're supposed to do, we're willing to preserve their record. So that's what we're talking about. And I'm going to take this a little further. This is something that's been going on across the Commonwealth anyway. Where I raise my eyebrow a little bit is this. A lot of DA's office have policies where they stop offering this, Greg, at the age of 21. So basically, you have up until 21 to make a mistake that was just an oops, so to speak.
But if you're 35 years old.
Exactly, and I don't understand that. I try to be a logical person. So you might make that first oops in your 30s, 40s, or 50s.
Yeah.
And why can't you be eligible? So my office is going to look at this and say, hey, this person's 43 years old. They made an oops. These were the circumstances behind it. They've led their life up until this point without any particular problems. They're demonstrating an ability to understand that I made an oops and you're never going to see me again. Why can't that person also qualify?
So this is a law that has a practical mentality behind it, but if it hasn't been happening on the Cape and Islands for all of these years, or I shouldn't say hasn't been happening, but if the mindset doesn't share that perspective as yours, you're going to have to really lean into that with the office if that becomes yours.
It's a little interesting. We announced, as you went to my website in January, these particular priorities of mine, and lo and behold, I get word in February that all of a sudden there's a case that's diverted in the adult session. I'm like, oh really?
No
That's interesting. So
interesting.
Yes.
Racial disparities.
Yes.
In your campaign material, you call for people in the district to unite, to share knowledge of how justice is being administered in our communities. And you were just talking about ways to get more communication going. In fact, you state, quote, "We must be willing to examine our own implicit biases and seek to use data to better understand the problems and create solutions." My question,
Yes.
in a time of deep division in our culture, in our country, and in our own communities, high crime in parts of the Cape and in this district, the war on opioids, some would say this, let's all come together and talk and unite and be one again, is wishful thinking. What do you say to those people?
I don't believe it's necessarily wishful thinking. Work needs to be done, and we're willing to put the work in. Talking about that racial disparity, and I don't know if you had a chance to read the statistics that came out is by Mass Inc. They talked about how the African American population in the Cape, Greg, was right around 3% plus or minus. But the pretrial detention of African Americans at the local house of correction was 25%. So, that's not simply a disparity.
Say that one more time.
Sure.
25% is accurate, current, but the average or the, say it again,
I'll
sorry.
say it, that's okay. The African American population on on the Cape comprises approximately 3%, plus or minus, a little above, a little low.
Yeah.
When you look at the pretrial detainees, those that are being held on bail at the House of Correction, they make up, African Americans make up 25% of that population. That's not just a simple disparity. That's a breakdown in the system.
Where is the breakdown specifically?
So this is what we've been talking about. You need to collect data to see what you're doing. If you don't collect data, then you're a ship out at sea and you don't have a course, so to speak, and there's no navigation. You need to see how you're handling these particular cases to guard against that implicit bias that you just touched upon. And this implicit bias, just so you know, was a year, maybe 2 years ago, that made its way up to the Supreme Judicial Court and is now incorporated in a jury instruction that the judge tells the jurors, listen, as you're deciding this particular case, I need to call to your attention and you need to focus on any implicit biases you may have. So this is something that our office is going to work on again from day one. Start assembling the data to see how we are handling these cases and then digest that data and go from there.
So do you have specific, I know you were talking about the community, is it community engagement director, community relations? Is it different from the community relations or community
They have a spokesperson.
relations officer? That's a different person.
It's one of the community engagement officers, someone who's out in the community. So that's what I'm
Kind
talking
of that
about.
one person.
It's not just simply a spokesperson.
So what data specifically are you looking for? And that's not being collected right now.
Every single case, we will note and keep the data of age, gender, race affiliation, things of that sort, what the charges are, what ultimately happens with the case. And of course, the bail question, is this person being detained on bail or are they out on conditions? So that's the type of data we're talking about.
When you talk about this community engagement officer, you reference the media. And how that person will handle the media, be responsive, as well as being responsive to community needs for information and tracking the data that you had talked about and producing an annual report. A lot of transparency seems to be what you're talking about.
Right. Go ahead.
But my question is, on media relations, tell me what's not working right now. You're at home watching things happen on TV, and is there a media issue?
I'm willing to bet you in journalism would rather have a conversation with someone than getting a press release. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
I think many, if not most of your colleagues would feel the same way. And it's for the obvious. You have an opportunity to ask questions, and the office can't hide behind a press release. So we will be opening our doors, so to speak, to have those particular conversations. Again, it's just another way for us to maintain the connections to the communities because the media also represents the community interests. Regarding that annual report, I looked around to other DA's offices. There is a DA out in Western Mass that every January he pumps out a report. I think his last one was about 86 pages, and it's just chock full of data. So I'm going to use that as a model, so to speak, when we're going to do the same thing.
On the responsiveness to citizens' need for information, what does that mean specifically?
So like freedom of information type stuff, or and I
Well,
apologize.
when we're talking, when you were saying that as part of this function, there is a need to be able to take in information or request for information from citizens. I read it as you have a Greg Anderson in East Sandwich who's saying, look, I got to really understand what's going on with this case, or with, this concerns me, or why did you say that? Right. Is there a need for more transparency as it relates to that office and an average citizen?
Oh, I think there's definitely a need. I want to be clear. There is absolutely a need for more transparency between the district attorney as it presently exists and the community that it serves. The whole notion of just consistently putting out their version, so to speak, through a press release, that will change under my administration.
What do you think your first 90 days would look like?
First time I asked that question. Well, it's going to be exciting. There's going to be a lot of openness, and since we're talking about transparency, where we are going to launch our ability to start collecting data. We're going to share with what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we're going to have a staff full of professionally skilled prosecutors.
So that's an interesting thought, is back on that question of, geez, you know, a new boss comes in, what does that mean to me? There are ADAs down there, there's other employees, 65 employees, I think you said.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people to say, yikes,
right.
What's going to happen?
Well, I mean, I think many of them may subscribe to the philosophy, the political philosophies of the present administration, so they're not even going to want to work under my administration. And then there are others that it's like anything. When you examine something, you look to see how can we make this better. And if there are other folks that can do the job or fill the roles better, then yeah, we're going to consider them.
Let's talk a little bit about your other your challengers. There are 3 of them. Have you found, when you look at the ability to present yourself as a candidate, regardless of the office, you have your own talking points,
right.
But there's also a little bit of, I need that person to challenge me in order for me to really make my point. Are you finding any level of interest to debate, to get together, to sit on a panel, to sit with me, with the 4 of you?
I will say on the record during this program, I've said it on the record in other programs, both radio and television, and I've said it to print media. I welcome a debate. I want a debate. The citizens deserve a debate. They need to hear what our positions are. And there are a lot of important positions right now. We all know the Dobbs decision came out recently. The Cape and Islands voters need to know where each of the candidates stand. So I welcome, if you want to get with your colleagues and come up with an idea, hey, about hosting a debate, I'm all in.
So why not debate? I mean, I'm not a politician. My dad ran for office. He was selectman and school committee, and he did all of that stuff. And he was also like, let's debate. But is there something to hide? Is there?
I would offer this.
What is it?
And I open myself up to scrutiny by the electorate, of course. Check out my resume. Check out my background and what I've done, you know, as a criminal lawyer and the public service things that I've done. Check that all out. Compare that with the other 3 candidates. And I'm suggesting to you that based on the comparison with all, I am the most qualified for this position. So let's have that debate. Let's have the others talk about their particular experiences and answer questions, myself included. Not just get up there and say, this is what I've done. Let's get to the core of some issues and answer some questions. I'm looking forward to my challengers, so to speak, or my opponents coming to that table.
Tell me a little bit about your, you know, when somebody goes into such a high-profile job, you know, a murder in Hyannis, the DA is in the news, the DA is under scrutiny, there's a lot of attention that's being put on that person, decisions made, then you throw in the political stuff that happens to get, oh, he investigated or there's a questionable, you know, act or whatever. It's a litigious world in a very big spotlight.
Right.
How does a family prepare for that? If this becomes you,
Yes.
you have a wife and 2 boys.
Yeah.
Tell me what happens at the dining room table when you guys are talking about Dad's doing this.
So I'll start off with this. I would love for our boys to be at the dining room table. Our boys are a little
Period.
older. Yeah, our boys are older.
I hear you.
We have one's a junior in college, the one's going to be a freshman in college. They're off doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So believe you me, I wish they were there all the time. Before we went forward with this campaign in January, as you might imagine, and I'll give it to you, January 5th is when O'Keefe announced. That was a Wednesday. Greg, that was date night in our house. So Wednesday night, my wife and I have date night, and my phone had been blown up all day by local people here on the Cape and Islands saying, you need to run, you need to run. So after a 2.5-hour dinner, which is usually an hour, 2.5-hour dinner, we said, okay, let's make some phone calls. The next day, it was off and running, and within 2 weeks or so after that, I announced my candidacy. My wife has given me the blessing. She's actually quite actively involved. She's a lot smarter than me. She's a PhD.
They always are.
She's a brilliant woman.
Yeah.
And both of our boys, they've helped out on the campaign when they can. They're fully supportive. And I candidly wish they were around more, but they're developing their own lives. And that's, as parents, what we're supposed to do. Try to give them the foundation so they can launch themselves.
We're running towards the end of time, but
Okay.
I just want to ask you, what do you see as your biggest challenge personally and as a candidate? What is the biggest challenge you think you're facing in your campaign?
So what I've been talking about is trying to launch a couple specialty sessions in the court, a mental health session and a veteran session. These exist, Greg, in other courts in other counties across the Commonwealth, not here in the Cape and Islands, and that touches on the complacency I've been talking about. I need to convince others to join me, those in the trial court, to say, hey, we should be launching these programs. They help reduce recidivism, and they are another way to connect to the community. So that is definitely going to be a challenge once elected, because it hasn't been going on down here. So it might be a little bit of resistance, but I'm looking forward to that challenge.
All right, closing arguments, Counselor. You see, that's me
Yep,
getting back into that
yeah,
role.
I'm telling you.
It's my thing.
It's not too late to go to the law school. It just isn't.
Oh, yes, it is. Instead of guilty and not guilty, Counselor, it's a yes or no vote for Rob Galibois. Why is it a yes? Why should I go into that polling location and check or circle your name?
2 reasons. The depth of my experience over 27 years. This is all I've been doing, and I know it extremely well. I've been very lucky to enjoy certain successes. The other one, and I ask you to ask the other candidates, should they sit in this chair? What's your vision? I'm also the only candidate that's talking about a vision for the office, about launching these particular specialty sessions, talking about community engagement, what my true vision is for the district attorney's office. So because of those 2 reasons, my experience and the vision for the office, that's why I'm asking for your vote, and that's why I'm suggesting I should be the next district attorney.
Attorney Robert Galibois.
Galibois.
Galibois. I was going to say it right, and then I just choked up a little bit on that, on getting it right. Thank you for making the time to talk today.
Thank you.
Good luck with your campaign.
Thank you, Greg.
All right, and do not forget to vote. And the primary election is on September 6th, and the general election on November 8th. I'm Greg Anderson. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you soon.
The views expressed in this program are the views of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the SCTV staff or board of directors.